All right, we have some people joining. We're going to give it another minute or two for our attendees to join, and then we will get started. Welcome, everyone.
Wow, there's someone here named Samantha Devine. That is really hilarious. My fiance is named Samantha Levine. I don't know if Samantha, that's you. Your name is spelled wrong, or there is in fact a Samantha. Wow, that is really, that just threw me for a little bit of a loop. Welcome.
I'm seeing some familiar names.
Same here.
These are all the family that we told to show up this evening.
Right. Or chosen
group.
family.
Chosen family, friends, yes, colleagues. One of my research partners is here, Whitney. Hi, Whitney.
Yes. Hi, Whitney.
Right. Is everyone staying cool today? Yeah. It's about to hit 100 tomorrow.
Kind of like Pride on Sunday. That was an adventure of a lot of heat.
Oh God, that was.
And Ben, I don't know how you did it. You kept running up and down the street, slapping hands.
I was having a grand old time. I probably had 16 water bottles just in the parade route because I was running up the sides, high-fiving everybody. I was doing crowd work. I was having a great time.
You were doing a great job, but I got tired watching you.
I'll tell you, my secret is that they left Union Station unlocked, and we went around the back and found an open door with an air-conditioned marble floor, and we went and laid down in there for like a half hour.
Oh my gosh.
Great idea.
Yeah, you know, I was surprised there weren't more people there. For next year, now you'll know.
Here's to irresponsible. Yeah, there's Colleen. Hey, Colleen. I'm gonna make you a co-host. There you go. All right.
Hi there.
Hi.
Hello.
I apologize for my tardiness. My Zoom decided it was time to update right when I was trying to join.
That's what always happens.
Yeah.
Always.
Okay.
Thanks for your patience.
Yeah, you're good. We were letting people in, talking about how hot it is here.
Yeah.
We're gonna hit 100 tomorrow. It's gonna be awesome.
Ugh, I'm so sorry.
I'm blaming my friend Carol, who's on the call today, because they came to visit, and when they came to visit, they brought all the hot weather with them.
Oh, Carol. Are they why it's so hot in Atlanta as well?
Oh, I don't know.
Awesome. Yes. We can turn on closed caption here. There we go. All right. So we're going to get started. Thank you everyone for being here. This is being recorded, so it will be available to folks afterwards. So everything we say can and will be used against us potentially for fun. But we're going to begin tonight with just some introductions. I'm Katie Heiden-Rootes. I'm the primary investigator for the research study and the writer for the family resource we're going to share tonight. And I have with me, I call them co-conspirators and accomplices in this work of being advocates for the LGBTQ community. So why don't we start off with Susan, you want to introduce yourself and say a little bit about why you're here?
Sure. My name is Susan Halla. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm the board president of a national nonprofit named Transparent. We were founded in St. Louis, and now we're in, I just did the math today. It was like 19 cities and 11 states or something like that. I have a transgender son who is 22 and doing awesome, and a gay transgender son, I guess I should say. And I want to share in with the joy of Katie writing this amazing book. She's been a wonderful colleague and friend, and I'm so happy to be here.
Awesome. Suzanne. Ben?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm Ben Greene. I use he, him pronouns. I am a trans man, also based out of St. Louis. I moved here when my fiance, who does a lot of research with Katie, started med school at SLU. And I have been super involved in the St. Louis activism and advocacy space. I do a lot of education around trans identities, a lot of coaching for parents and families of trans youth. I'm the advocacy chair of PFLAG, which is an organization that helps parents, family members, and loved ones of LGBTQ plus people learn how to be allies. I am all up everywhere in St. Louis advocacy that I can be. So I'm very excited to be a part of this.
Awesome. I want to eventually tell a story about how we met at the Capitol. We didn't know each other, but we'll circle back to that. All right, Colleen, go for it.
Awesome. Nice to meet you all. My name is Colleen Clark. My pronouns are she, her, and I illustrated and designed the booklet with the amazing content provided to me by Katie and everybody else who worked on it. I currently live in Atlanta, although I'm originally from Maryland. Don't know if anyone is else is familiar with Maryland at all, but it's been awesome seeing all of the amazing laws that Maryland has been passing recently. I think they just recently became a trans haven state, or like a safe state. So some pride there. But currently in Georgia, my wife identifies as non-binary, and with them back in 2018, we founded the non-binary genderqueer Atlanta group. And so that's something that, even though I identify as cis, I've been able to have a hands-on learning opportunity with helping create community for people, for non-binary and trans people within Atlanta. And that's been an awesome learning experience. But luckily I've been able to work on this. And I think this is my third or fourth project with the depending on what it's been, either focused specifically on trans people or queer people within the St. Louis University. So thank you for having me again.
Yeah, we just keep building Colleen into our grant budgets to come turn stale research into something that we can communicate to the masses. So we are so thankful for your partnership and willingness to put up with us in this academic world that we're in.
Oh my gosh, it's been such an amazing opportunity.
Well, that's good to hear, because we have another project coming your way. All right, so I'm going to share my screen here. Tonight, it's really going to be focused on going over this resource, walking folks through it, and then providing you all with the resource through, there's a web link you'll get at the end, and you can go grab it and share it, and it will be available publicly. The origins of this resource, this family resource guide, was the very beginning of the research study we did. We put together a group of community advocates, young people who are part of the LGBTQ community. And one of those young people looked at me during our first meeting and said, "Will I ever even see it? Will I ever even know what happens to this study?" And I went, "Oh, will I okay." Confronted with my own bias and places that typical academics go when we publish our research. And I said, let me go back to my funder and see if we can get some money to put together some kind of what we call public scholarship. So where we take the research and we make it publicly available and also publicly digestible. It has to be accessible. You all have to be able to read this, understand this, have it make sense to you in picture or word format. And so, of course, then I came to Colleen and I said, "You think we could do this? Would you do this with me?" And she said yes. And so we took the research study we did with 14 families who went through family therapy, a particular evidence-based kind called attachment-based family therapy. And we took those findings and we put them into an illustrated resource. Our not so secret agenda, dare we say a gay agenda of some kind, is to really promote that families seek LGBTQ affirming family therapy as they walk through this process with their young person. There's lots of different kinds of therapies out there, lots of different kinds of therapists, and we really think it's central to a family getting through this and young people being healthy and living long, thriving lives when they are met with a mental health professional who is LGBTQ affirming. So that is our open queer agenda, and we're going to stand by that. So what I was hoping is this wonderful panel of people, guests, co-conspirators, as we move through, that we can talk about both the art and illustration that Colleen put together, and also, obviously, I know you all have personal and professional insights associated with this, and I'm always curious how much the research matches real life, and how you all are taking in what these families shared with us after their experience of family therapy together. So I've shared my screen. I want to say too to the audience, feel free to throw questions. There's a Q&A, and I will watch that Q&A as we move through. Feel free to throw in questions. If someone says something, you're like, what's that person talking about? Or tell me more about this, please feel free to do that. And we will get to them as best we can. Cool. All right. So we have our opening. This is the very front of the resource guide, the LGBTQ Youth Go to Family Therapy, Stories of Opening Up, Listening to Feelings, and Taking on Ghosts. And we'll walk through why it's titled that. This first illustration, frankly, scares me a little bit because that is an illustration of me sitting in a chair, and a family sort of in the midst of that process. Colleen, do you want to talk a little bit about the ribbon you have running through it, and what you were doing there?
Yeah, and this might become more obvious as we walk through it a bit, but one of the kind of struggles of trying to make sure that we present this accurately while still having it be as personable as possible was these are all virtual therapy appointments. And so trying to make sure that we illustrate that there's a intimate connection happening, there's extremely successful therapy happening here that transcends the virtual space. And so the ribbon was an idea to kind of separate Katie from the family. So to reference this idea that they're in two separate places a little bit, while still showing that there's a connection and a conversation happening. And both Katie and the family are kind of wrapped up in this trans ribbon that shows up, I think, one or two more times throughout the booklet, but really wanted to emphasize, like, this is the thing connecting all of these families together throughout this booklet.
Wonderful. So there's some acknowledgements here. I'm not reading through these. We're not going word for word. That is not interesting for you all to hear. But there are some colleagues and friends who made this possible, including Transparent and Squish, if you are not familiar with that organization, the St. Louis Queer Support Helpline, and our colleagues at WashU as well. So table of contents. This was also one of Colleen's ideas about having our young people sort of moving and walking through. We had our young people who were identified in many different ways in terms of being trans, queer, and a lot of folks just questioning. We had several folks who just weren't sure. We had quite a range of ages from 12 to 18. So as you might imagine, at very different places about this. All right. Yeah, let's get past my picture. We're just going to keep it moving here. This is maybe my favorite illustration, Colleen, because I was telling Colleen that almost every family, there was some story about cats or cats in the background. I mean, this therapy happened during 2020 and 2022. And so we were COVID heavy during this time. And so cats and telehealth were just part of the therapeutic process, as you might imagine. There's also a note in here about Missouri, given all the legislation. And I wanted to be clear about the context we were in, that this has not been a friendly context for families and young people to come out. And I know you all have been involved in some of that. I don't know, Ben and Susan, if you want to say anything about the Missouri context, that would be helpful for folks to understand, other than to say it's a dumpster fire.
It is a dumpster fire. It isn't only Missouri. It is happening as a coordinated attack across many of the more red-leaning states across the United States. One by one, all of these laws are going to court and being struck down. Most recently in Arkansas, which is the same federal district that Missouri lies in, their healthcare ban was struck down at the federal level. We anticipate seeing this happening time and time again and continue to be struck down. This doesn't make it any less scary for parents or the kids that this directly impacts. And I personally have a number of friends who are actually moving from Missouri, and it's very hard.
Yes, agreed. Agreed.
I shared a resource in the chat as well. Erin Reed, for those of you who don't know her, is a prominent transgender activist and journalist who does a lot of reporting about all of what's happening. She is my most trusted resource about keeping on top of all of the things that are happening. She's on social media, on Substack. So staying informed can be challenging, but it's helpful, A, to know the ways these attacks are coordinated, because we can learn from other activists in other states the way they were able to beat their bills. And we can hear the good news too, because there are I think we've had 11 now court victories so far across the country, and no losses yet is something that is a glimmer of hope for me, is that we are not seeing any, and largely conservative judges ruling in our favor, because these bills are so blatantly unconstitutional and discriminatory. So I'm hoping that we are seeing a nice swell of the tides in our favor.
Yeah, well, that's good to hear. I didn't know that statistic. That's a helpful one.
Yeah.
Awesome. That is hopeful. Thank you. So the introduction also introduced our therapists. We had 3 of them, one being myself, Dr. Brittany Robinson, and Rita Skiba. All of us were licensed mental health professionals. All of us had family experience, but you see our quotations show up, and they were such good sports in allowing Colleen to draw them as well, and weigh in on sort of what we all looked like. There's also, we did interviews with the therapist afterwards. So the quotes are from interviews about their experience with families and some insights that we hope translate and are useful to families. We have a general glossary of terms. If this is new for you, it was clear to us in working with the families that some of this was very new to parents, and they needed just some basic sort of education around what the words mean. And so we tried to offer a few of them. For the sake of this audience, as well as the therapy, we put a definition for attachment. It's a very particular therapy word. It sounds very therapy-esque, but essentially we're looking at how safe young people feel in their relationship to their parents, how willing they are to go to them when they're struggling. We know that when young people are struggling, particularly when we look at like suicidality, or we look at like serious distress, youth are safer when they know they can go to a trusted adult. We know for our LGBTQ youth, those adults need to show some level of acceptance and warmth in terms of who they are and their identity. And so attachment becomes deeply connected then the security they feel with their parents in terms of how their parents respond when they come out. Those are linked things. All right, key finding number 1, and I'm very curious from you, Susan, to hear what you think about this one. One of the big findings was how emotional parents were when their kids come out. And I'm not talking about, there's a whole narrative around grief and loss. We certainly had a couple of parents who talked about that, but other parents had every feeling you can think of. I mean, we heard everything. It was the whole range, the whole rainbow of feelings. These parents had them, and they were big. And they often didn't know what to do with them. And so I'm curious to hear from your experience, as well as I know, Ben, you work with parents, sort of how this finding resonated with you all, perhaps things you've seen or experienced yourselves.
It was exactly what I've seen with all the families that I've worked with, that the experiences run the gamut from, yeah, I knew it, to the sky is falling kind of thing. So it was nice to hear this expressed in this lovely written and illustrated form, that every reaction is a valid reaction.
Yeah, I know one thing that I really want to highlight that resonates with me, both from the angle of I do a lot of work with parents, I'm often a first call, and from the angle of I came out as trans at 15 in 10 years ago. So in a time where people were having all sorts of reactions. And there's a line on page 7 of youth witnessed the grief, confusion, and loss of their parents. And one youth commented that this was difficult to watch. And that was something that really resonated with me, is And something I talk to parents a lot about is, you can have, there is exactly as you said, Susan, there's no bad or wrong reaction. Well, there's a bad reaction. There's no wrong emotion to feel, and you can't control the emotions you feel, but it's important to be mindful of how you're communicating that. I know from my own experience and from the other transgender young people I've talked to, that first reaction, it's especially for a young person, it's hard to hold the two truths of this is upsetting you, this is hard for you, and you still love me. The implied message, kids have simpler brains. And so it's, oh, I told you this, you are now upset. It's because you don't support me. It's because you are angry at me. You don't like that I'm doing this. And it is really hard to watch, especially that grieving narrative, to feel like, for me at least, that I was alive for the first time. And I was told that I killed someone. And I felt like I had been there all along. And that was really challenging. So I love that you highlighted both that it is absolutely so real to have so many emotional reactions and to find external resources, to talk to your spouse, to talk to a family therapist, to find ways to process through that beyond asking your kid to hold that, I think is really beautiful.
Yeah, agreed. I'm going to move back up to the illustration. Colleen, can you talk through kind of what you were up to here? I love this illustration.
Oh, thank you. This was one thing that I was just talking to Katie about yesterday as we were wrapping everything up, was that it was, trying to summarize such a nuanced concept into one non-animated picture is really hard, and trying to give grace to all people involved in this, but it was easier for me to do that because so much of this is written with such grace, and so much of this is written to validate how a parent might feel, while instructing them gracefully through how actions can harm their children when acted on these emotions without thinking them through. And so one thing that I was hoping to illustrate here is the idea of this trans flag kind of as a safety blanket, as a comfort to the kid in the front. They're finding a lot of comfort, especially with like this blue stripe, maybe indicating that this person might be transmasculine. And then the parents kind of feeling more like wrapped up or confused, or they're trying to find their place within this identity. And they are navigating around this pink flag, maybe representing that this kid might be, again, transmasculine. So the idea here was I wanted to try to skirt the line, not showing that this trans flag is like this scary thing you can get tangled up in and it's so confusing and stressful, but that there's a place for this whole family to understand this eventually. It just requires paying the most attention to their child and how comfortable they feel.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Thank you.
Other comments or thoughts from anyone about this particular theme? I mean, I imagine it's connected to this right here where it shows up later, right? Where the quote here is about a mom going, what do I do with these memories I have of my kid as a baby girl? What do I do with that? That there's a lot of questions around that. And there's me giving my quote. So one of the things, like what the quote here is about attachment and its connection to if a parent can enter a child's world. One of the really technical words for this is intersubjectivity. It's the ability of a parent or a caregiver to really meet the kid in their world, as opposed to what happens a lot of times. We ask kids to enter adult worlds, to see it from adult perspectives, right? We sometimes use quite a bit of ageism to do that to them, right? Or we expect them to behave almost better than adults periodically. But one of the things I noticed is that the parents who could really move through it, and when we saw change happen, you saw them kind of have this moment where they entered their child's world. They let go just for a moment, their adult world and ideas and experiences, and went, I wonder what it's like to be them. And when they could do that, you would watch the parent. I mean, one of the goals of therapy, but you would watch them maybe for one of the first times in the context of their identity, have empathy. Right. And not that the parent was ever going to share the child's, queer identity, but they were able to go, at least touch it and start to understand it in a way that opened them up to have more empathy and could then validate them. I think the parents who struggled were the ones who resisted entering the child's world, who kind of kept their distance and went, no, that's not what's going on, or there was a bit more conflict. I know right now the rhetoric out there is about, whether or not kids should, seek gender affirming medical services, but we were just trying to get the parents to have contact with the kid, right? Just to lean in and go, can you imagine what it's like to be them right now? And that was really the goal. And you could really watch that happen. And it's such an honor to do this work. It was beautiful.
And it's so difficult as a parent or as anyone, because you're parenting from your life experiences. And if you didn't have the life experience of being involved in the LGBTQ community, then it's like this vast confusion to the parent.
Yeah, absolutely. Confusion was actually maybe the most common feeling. It cut across almost, confusion plus all the other things, but confusion was certainly very, very evident. We have a question in the chat. I'm curious about families where maybe one parent handles a situation better or worse than the other and how that impacts the kiddo. I imagine you three have seen that before. In the context of the study, I'll answer that and then we can go to the panel. That happened, we had 10 of the 14 families had a 2-parent home. And the dads attended, which is highly unusual in family therapy research. You all should know that. It's almost always the mother who shows up for family therapy. And we had a few families, I wouldn't even say the majority, maybe half of the 2-parent households. One of them struggled more than the other. And in one case, I remember it was the mom. In 2 other cases, it was dads. And quite often it was grounded in actually one of the next key findings, which is dealing with the ghosts of families past, dealing with the way they were raised, dealing with, for example, one of the moms who really struggled talked about how she's a feminist and being a woman really is beautiful. And here is her kiddo identifying as transmasculine. And she was having her own identity conflict with that and had to sort that out. And so I think it can be a mixed bag. Our goal or hope with attachment-based family therapy is to bring both parents into alignment about this. But at the end of the day, the research is hopeful and saying we really just need one. We need one. We'd love 2 or more. We'd love a whole family. We'd love a whole world, frankly. But if we can get one, we can make a big difference for this kiddo in terms of suicide prevention and thriving in mental health. Other comments from the panel about that?
Yeah, that is definitely something that I have seen in a number of families, and definitely it's very interesting that that showed up on. And as you're talking, I'm looking through the list of attendees, and I don't know who's got multiple people attending, but I'm seeing mostly a lot of typically feminine names, and that is what I have seen in all of my speaking work and all of my advocacy work and all the parent calls I get. It is largely women, and that's there's maybe some more systemic and historical roots that we don't have time to get into tonight, but it is really interesting to think about the ways that shows up. And I do see with the kids, just having one person who says, I am on your side, makes such a big difference. And to be truly on their side really is so life-saving for those kids to know there's at least one person who sees you as you are is so crucial.
Yeah.
And I've seen it in some families where, again, at transparent meetings, we will have both parents show up to those meetings, but if it's only one parent, it'll often be the mother. And we've had parents where the father just wasn't on board and just didn't understand. But it was kind of like they started attending these meetings and they got the language to really be able to express to their spouse what this meant to their kid. And by leading by example of just loving their kid and listening, having a child-led experience for this process, the father kind of started to come along because they realized what they were missing out on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we see a lot of, in our like society's gender roles, this idea of masculinity, one of the priorities being rationality or facts over feelings. And so LGBTQ identities are exclusively, this is how I feel. There is a lot of science behind that if you want to get super nitty gritty, but that's not the point. You shouldn't need that science. But for a lot of guys, it's okay. Well, this is how you feel. That's not relevant to me. Talk to me when you've got facts. And so I think unfortunately, it does often fall on the mothers to say, let me go and get the facts about suicide prevention, about what's going on. Here's the language, here's the history. And then those facts or hey, you are missing out on something, your kid needs you. That sometimes is enough, hopefully will become enough for a lot of people. And gathering those facts I've seen be really helpful as well.
Yeah, wonderful. So we have in here a whole conversation that Colleen wanted to highlight, and and I did too in the findings, because one of the things that the youth talked about was trying to tell their parents, and their parents not realizing either what they were being told that the kid was coming out, or not realizing that some of the subtle ways the young person was trying to signal their identity or where they were at was kind of a testing of the waters to kind of see if they're going to be taken seriously, see if mom and dad are going to catch on. And this was a back and forth that happened during a pre-interview to therapy, and you watch the kid trying to say who they are, and the mom going, well, I didn't know. And the kid's like, yeah, you did. Right. And there's this back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And at the end, the mom says, okay, I didn't understand the severity of how it was affecting you. Right. There's this sort of non-realization. And we noticed the reason I highlighted that, and Colleen put it in these bubbles, is the conversation is not always as, it doesn't look like a movie. It's not going to look like a TV series, right? It's going to be sometimes a little bit more subtle is the word that's coming to mind for me. Or you're going to watch the kids sort of testing the attachment. Are you going to be there for me? Can I say this? Let's gauge your reaction when I tell you about my friend. Let's find out when I tell you about this character on my TV show, right? Like, let's see your reaction to see if it's okay, and sort of step into it. So communication became a tough one around this topic.
Yeah, this conversation drove me nuts. It made me so mad looking at it. But I think a lot of parents can probably see themselves in this, for better or for worse, if they're willing to see themselves in this. And this could apply to so many different things. I mean, it reminded me of telling my mom when I was young that I was gay, and her reaction was, it's just a phase. And my mom is so accepting and so open-minded, but I think she kind of short-circuited, because even though she considers herself open-minded, the idea of it happening inside your own home, you want to maybe explore other realities before you settle on the one that is the actual reality. But in this case, I just was looking at this and feeling like this parent had really failed their kid, and hopefully they've learned how that kid was trying to communicate with them better from this conversation.
Yeah. I'm happy to report they did.
Yay. Oh, good.
I particularly know this family. This is one of the families that I worked with. But yeah, I mean, it took two parts. It took this parent's willingness to sort of go, okay, I didn't know, you're right, I didn't understand. And then the young person learning to trust the parent, and then speak, as plainly as possible, and know it's going to be okay. So yeah.
I do really like, and I don't know if I'm sure there were larger contexts than what I can see here, but I like that they have this conversation. And at the end, the parent says, well, I didn't understand the severity of how it was affecting him. And that like little, yeah, I didn't see it, I didn't get it, I maybe I didn't want to believe it, whatever's going on there, but I'm using the right pronouns in this sentence. And that like is very reflective to me that a lot of parents start from a variety of places. A lot of the like day one reactions aren't always going to be perfect. And that's, you're going to have to take time to, you know, unpack that and work through the impacts of that. But it is possible to get up to that point of where you want to be and to get, as you said, even further than this point, right? This was at the beginning, but the fact that she is working through this stuff, but still using the right pronouns and saying, I'm going to figure it out as best I can. I really enjoy that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, key finding number 2. And this is one that often goes, at least in the research standpoint, from what I see, we don't talk as much about the work parents need to do to get there. We talk a lot about family rejection or family acceptance. You know, we have these like binary ideas about it. We don't talk as much about parents start in a particular place and then do their work to come along alongside their kiddo. And that work is possible to be done. And attachment-based family therapy is it's funny. It's as much a parenting intervention as it is a youth intervention. And for me, that's why I wanted to use it, because my experience had been these parents really need support. They need a place they can work through their stuff. And so when I was working through this theme, I was thinking about how to talk about the parents' work without turning the parents into bad guys, you know, without turning them into the enemy of the kid, because they're not. They're actually the resource the kid needs. And so my job is to engage them in their work without turning them into, you know, bad people. So I started thinking about the parents' family of origins that always came up as sort of the ghosts of families past, right? That would come and haunt the current family and keep parents from being able to maybe be the kind of parents they wish they could be. So this was what I came up with. And then Colleen came up with this beautiful idea of family pictures as a way of illustrating generations past. Colleen, do you want to talk at all about your sort of idea for this finding?
Yeah. So one of the things that I wanted to emphasize here, and the kind of portraits on the wall as a theme reoccurs throughout this, but something I wanted to show here was that we don't actually know how these like older family members feel about the kid or the family, but the parents still have anxiety about it. And so they are looking either to the past or to their current loved ones with anxiety about how do they feel? Am I living up to their expectations? But these people are the older people are more static in time, whereas the family with the trans child are more lively. They're popping out of the frame a little bit. The kid has a very like neutral expression because, you know, they're just living their life, and then the parents are feeling anxious about well, how will my mom think about this? How would my grandma feel about this? But we don't actually know, because either these people aren't there anymore or they're not weighing in any present way, but the anxieties and the worries about how they would interpret it are still weighing heavily on the parents.
Wonderful. So this theme had 2 sub-themes, because moms and dads' reactions, although there were ghosts from the past, the way they talked about it was very different. Moms, so this came from a quote from one of the moms who said they could feel the weight of this fragile world, right? There's a question in the chat right now about the current political climate. I mean, that is part of the fragile world, right? This context we're living in of laws being passed and court cases, and I mean, all the stuff, right? That's part of the fragile world, including these families of origin. I've certainly worked with families where parents stopped going to extended family gatherings because of the reactions of aunts, uncles, grandparents, right, when a kid comes out. So moms talked about just this heaviness they felt to kind of be the person. This probably connects back to what we talked about before about moms always being the ones who show up in these kinds of contexts, at least historically. And so I love this illustration of this mom sort of trying to fix and hold together what already feels broken. You know, thoughts, comments about this from the panel?
I was going to say from Brian's question, it hit so close to home because my son didn't feel comfortable in actually telling me in person that he was trans, and so the night before he was going to leave to go, my ex-husband and I are divorced, his dad, and before he was about to go back to his dad's house, he left a note on the table explaining all about how he was trans and what he was feeling and things, and he didn't think that I would see it until after he left for his dad's house. But I read it that night, and he was still awake because I think he was worried about it, and I just went to his room and I just hugged him and we both started to cry. And I told him, I said, I'm not crying because you're trans. I'm crying because of society and what's going to happen to you. And it's going to be ugly and it's going to be hard, and it's going to be hard for all of us, him especially, but for us as parents, it's really hard when you come up against people that don't see the world. I'm just going to say, don't see the world correctly.
Yeah. 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 You're reminding me of one of our other pictures, and maybe we'll get to it in a second, that Colleen had drawn about that looking forward with your kid. So I think we're going to talk some more about that in a second. But thank you for sharing that, Susan. For the dads, we talked about them having to confront, and I probably could have put like masculine ghosts of families past, because a lot of the dads talked about their dads in the context of this. And I think all but one or two dads had like a dad who was either absent or abusive, and had some pretty rough childhood experiences. And all these messages around masculinity and roles. And so Colleen drew this like kind of generational picture, right, of the places people can come from. And for me as a family therapist, we're always thinking about generational healing. How do we change the next generation, given we're going to do something different? And for me, these dads and showing up wanted to do something different, right? They wanted to have a different experience with their young person. And I mean, I was certainly impressed with that, and them sharing with us as researchers, sharing, all the things that they had gone through to get here. And it was funny, in the post interviews, they talked about how they didn't realize this therapy was for them and how much they got out of parent only time with the therapist, where it was just the parents with the therapist. And a couple of them said, I had been to therapy, but man, this was different, because they were confronted with their own childhoods and being a parent themselves. And a lot of attachment-based family therapy is about pulling out your experiences of being parented and how that influences you now. Comments, thoughts? I see another question in the chat.
Yeah, this definitely kind of resonates with me from the dads that I have spoken to. There was definitely, I've heard a lot of like, if my dad had seen me dress this way, if I had said this to him, like that, facts over feelings, tough masculinity, like tough love, which is really usually in the way that people talk about tough love. There is a place for tough love, not in the way it was being described. Like that kind of tough love and that newness of talking about feelings and of confronting that. If I have learned one thing about masculinity in my 10-year tenure as a man, it is definitely how, and I was not expecting how isolating it would be, and the like different ways people engage with you talking about your own emotions. I've seen a lot of dads try to talk about their feelings with their kid or with their spouse, and people almost aren't expecting it and don't know how to hold space for that. So I think finding a family therapist or someone who can hold that space is so important. Yeah.
There's a question in chat around intersectionality. So 12 of our 14 families were white. 2 of them had Hispanic Latinx backgrounds. There was some talk, for example, we had a family where generationally, one of the parents had been a first generation kiddo from family was from Mexico. And so they talked about it in the context of language, Spanish language, in the context of machismo and masculinity. But ultimately, their commitment as a family, which is another value grounded in their ethnicity, that said, we're not letting go of this kiddo. So in this study, unfortunately, we did not have the racial diversity we were hoping for. But when it did come up, the other intersection we saw, I will say, was religion. Religion was one of the most common comments about families past. And what their family was doing now with that. There were families who had switched churches or had stopped going or saw that as like something previous generations did, but could feel those same sort of rules or messages in their minds as they were trying to figure out what to do or what those big feelings were connected to. So I wish we had more. I hope future studies would look more specifically at particular groups who I'm sure have that multiple marginalization intersection. All right, I'm noticing the time, but I love all these questions and commentary. All right, key finding 3. This was a big one. If you notice, the first 3 key findings are all about parents, which I found kind of funny when we were doing this. But the parents talked about learning to listen more and fix less. And you see them here putting their tools away, locking it up, and letting go of needing to fix things. Colleen, can you talk a little bit about this illustration?
Yeah, this was one that we ended up pulling out into 2 different illustrations because we really wanted to show the physical, putting the tools away, and the lock on the lockbox, showing that like these parents are committing to this. It's an active commitment that you have to make. You have to actively put the habits that are not working and are not helping away, and you have to actively keep them locked away in order to really show up the best way you can when it comes to listening. And I mean, this is something that's really hard for me just in general with problem solving in my life. And so I found this to be one of the more important key findings when it came to appropriating this to other types of acceptance in life.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Yeah. Other comments from Ben or Susan?
I think Susan, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think that's a struggle that we all have. The first thing that I did when my kid told me he was trans, that next morning after we had our good cry, the next morning I'm on the phone, calling all the doctors, doing all the stuff, because that's what I thought I had to do, right? Like, how do I fix this?
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Yeah, whenever I talk to families about support, it definitely, like, I find myself falling into that solution-focused mindset about everything. And I try to encourage families to ground their support in joy and in celebration, because I know for me coming out was one of the most joyful things I could have done. It was terrifying, but also I finally was getting to live as Ben. And I wish we had spent a minute celebrating that. And I've seen kids who got gender reveal parties, or even just a card that says it's a boy, or something funny like that. But those moments of celebration to say it's not just that you have created a new set of problems that we're going to support you through because we love you, but trans identities aren't a problem. That I love that I'm trans. If I could go back again, I would do this again in a heartbeat. I love that I am trans and has created so much magic in my life, even if there are problems to be solved. And so remembering to, ground that in joy and in listening is so crucial.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you, Ben. Yeah, I think that was certainly a sentiment from the youth, which is actually one of our next findings. Let's talk about this picture, because it's going to get at what Brian was putting in the chat, what we were talking about. Colleen and I spent quite a bit of time talking about like, how do we say this, right? Because we didn't want to do what you were describing there, Ben. We didn't want it to scare parents or make it all problem, right? And the world is not friendly all the time, right? And so how do you show this? And then how do you show, when parents learn to listen more and fix less, They join their young people right alongside them, as opposed to continuing trying to fix them or make the path smoother necessarily, although I'm as guilty of that as the next parent. So Colleen, do you want to talk through this picture and your thought process here?
Yeah, this was the illustration that took me the longest, both to ideate, to figure out how was I going to depict this, but also figuring out the character of this path ahead for this family. I wanted to show that it's a path you have to carve out yourself. It's not necessarily easily treadable territory. It's something that you have to work through, but it's not necessarily full of terror and fear. It doesn't have to be that way. And so trying to create this kind of path ahead where it looks maybe mysterious, maybe uncharted, but it's not, that's the scary forest that's like attacking Snow White. It's a forest that can be really inviting and exciting. It can be a natural exploration, but it's not necessarily going to be easy. And so I wanted to try to create a forest that has this kind of glimmer of light at the very end of the path there. It's something that you can get lost in, but not necessarily be lost forever in. So I wanted to show that this parent and child were ready to embrace it. But it's not necessarily going to be easy. And so that was, trying to make sure that these trees don't look too scary, trying to make sure that it has that kind of quality to it where it can be an adventure, but it's not necessarily going to be easy. So that was a tough one.
Awesome. Other comments from folks?
I wish one of the logs was in the middle of the walkway, because there's always a hurdle.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
Yeah, that is true. Beautiful. All right, so we'll get to the young people now. So the young people, so LGBT youth find freedom to talk openly about hard things and find a friendly face in attachment-based family therapy. Uniformly, the young people talked about the therapist as being friendly, easy to talk to, so nice. I'll get to some of their quotes. But honestly, therapy was a lot of spending time talking about what they were hearing from their parents, trying to understand it, and then figuring out sort of how to support them in responding. Attachment-based family therapy in the one-on-one time with young people and parents is meant to prepare them to come to a conversation in the family setting. So it's not to create privacy. You and I are on a team together against your parents. It's good questions. I hear how you heard your parents saying that and how that felt to you. I think we need to tell them. That's so, I think they would want to know that hurt your feelings or that they misunderstood. It's sort of encouraging them to have that conversation. And when the parents are ready, when they're ready to listen more and fix less, that's when you're working with the youth to go, I think your parents ready to hear that. So often we had parents say, the best part about this therapy is the kid actually came and talked to me. Because so often we send, queer youth to therapy and go figure it out. And it's like, well, they need to figure out how to share with you what's happening for them, because it then opens up that communication and they know they can come to you again and again and again. And my job as a therapist, ironically, is to get fired. Is to not be needed by the family, right? Where the kid has the language and the trust, right? And the emotional closeness with their parents to do it. And the parents are prepared to, be there and listen and validate and have empathy. So they talked about this one-on-one time with the therapist as being sort of easy. It was hard to go back with those conversations, but helpful and easy for them. I don't mean to brag, but Brittany and Rita and I are pretty cool. And Rita had cats of her own that would show up in the background. And so there was, again, more cat things happening with telehealth. Comments, thoughts about this one? Young people.
I specifically locked my cats out tonight, Katie. Sorry.
Dang it.
Yeah, I think for the young people, a lot of what I see is that testing the waters you mentioned, and that it's always testing the waters. I'm always looking around to see who around me is a safe person. For a lot of young people, they're doing that. And I think because of the way that you come into the space and okay, this is the space we've set up, not having to do that creates such a safe environment to know, okay, this person is on my side without a shadow of a doubt. I am really comfortable. And I think that is such a special space to have access to, and then to have that person in the room for larger conversations builds that really safe environment.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, one of the commitments to the young people in attachment-based family therapy is I'm not going to speak for you in family therapy. That's not my job. I'm not a tattletale, as they used to say when I was a kid, right? But I am going to help you figure out how to say it. And I want to be there with you as you do, right? I'm not going to leave you. And parents felt the same way. I mean, parents felt like we were with them too, while they were trying to understand. I watched video footage of Brittany and Rita doing therapy, and it is, I mean, they are just curators of these conversations, these tough conversations. So the youth talked about the therapist going deeper with them. I'm letting them explore their feelings openly, not being worried about what they're going to say and if someone's going to be upset with them, which was positive. All right, last finding. This is a really quick one. There were a couple of families at the end where it became very evident that although attachment-based family therapy was very helpful to them, they had other things they needed to deal with that were even outside of that young person's identity. We had a mom in recovery from substance abuse, and she needed more support. Right. And sort of realizing that maybe some of the stress and tension isn't just about this, it's actually about these other things that we need to go take care of. And I think that was important to differentiate for these families. In one other case, we had parents who were still struggling with their kids' trans identity and really hadn't made as much progress as some of the other families. They were in a place where they were very committed to the kid. They weren't going anywhere. They were going to figure this out, but they needed longer term therapy. And we sent them along to another family therapist. And so it's just how some families are, right? Like no therapeutic process is perfect or magic. But we got them sort of further along than they were and gave them some new tools. So thoughts about that? Perhaps you all have seen families who needed a bit more work.
I think there's several things to know about therapy as a non-therapist, but as a person who's going on 10 years with their own therapist, is that I didn't find this therapist until after I'd seen like 3 or 4 other therapists. And it's not, you have to find the person that's right for you. Now, I think Katie is right for everybody, but I mean, I think it's important. And I think the more that we destigmatize mental health for everybody, especially males, I think, I don't necessarily think that I need a therapist, but I want a therapist because it's great having that objective person just to like blah, throw everything at during the month and just have someone, a space to let it all out. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Nope. Go ahead, Colleen.
I was going to say my dad is actually a family therapist, and I am in a very small, very lucky minority in that way, so that I've never had to worry about being the first person to introduce these types of concepts to my dad. And one of the things that he always talked about as a huge frustration in his work, he used to work for the juvenile court system in Maryland, and it would be so frustrating when young people who were in trouble with the law for whatever reason, he would have recognized pretty immediately that they needed help, that they needed therapy, but through the court system, he couldn't get family therapy approved as a treatment through the courts. And it just drove him nuts because that was where the problem came from. There was no solution that the child could bring home and introduce to the parents that was going to be more successful than the parents learning it alongside the child in the way that we've been describing here. And that is just, it's such a shame. It's such a missed opportunity. The fact that so many parents, the first time they meet a queer or trans person is when their child comes out to them. That's awful. You know, it's an awful situation for that kid. And it's a missed opportunity for the parents to have come more prepared and more well-rounded in that information.
Yeah, wonderful. We're getting to the end of our time here. We did create a too long didn't read. So if you want to just go to the end of the resource and get a very brief snippet summary, what's beautiful about PDFs is you can just print one page and use that wherever you like. But this is a summary of sort of all 5 of the findings, illustrated, of course, by Colleen in beautiful ways, and a couple of concluding thoughts. And I suspect, one of the reasons family therapy is such a struggle for folks to require, let's say in a court setting or go to, is it's really hard. It's a vulnerable work as a parent to put yourself next to your kid in a room with a perfect stranger and start talking about these hard things. On the other hand, it can be highly effective. And I wish it was more common for folks to seek that out when we're looking at a kiddo who might be struggling in a court system with suicidality, with any number of things. So I wanted, we also have a list of resources here, of course. Transparent is listed as a place for families to go. But I wanted to conclude by giving the panelists a chance to give those who are attending kind of one takeaway, one action step. If you're going to leave them with sort of one piece of advice or one thing to do next, what would you say? Yeah.
I would say that too often we don't want to show vulnerability in front of our children. And I think the only way to let your child open up to you is to open up to them, and that it's okay to be vulnerable, to show that you're not perfect, because no parent is. Now, I'm not saying dumping your problems on your kid. That's just the opposite of what I mean. But really starting that conversation by you being vulnerable yourself and allowing your kid to realize it's okay to say these things to my mom or dad.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like you're almost saying to be able to say to your kid, I'm struggling. This is a me problem, not a you problem. But you should know that I'm having my own stuff right now, and I'm not perfect either.
Right.
Yeah, totally.
And I also want to say to anonymous attendee, I love that. My kid is perfect just the way they are. Yes, they are. Every kid is perfect just the way they are.
Awesome.
Absolutely. I love that. The other note I'll share as kind of a takeaway or as a reminder to kind of balance out something that you said as well, Susan, and to talk about those kind of big feelings that a lot of parents go through when their young person comes out. It is like a roller coaster, and it's like a roller coaster maybe in more ways than you think, in that it's terrifying. Roller coasters seem so absurd as a concept. They seem so dangerous. But the reason we feel safe to get on a roller coaster and to be afraid is knowing that other people have ridden that ride before. Other people have gotten off smiling. There are other people on the ride with us as we speak. So you don't have to do this alone. Look up who made the roller coaster. Find the resources around you. Find the people around you that are going through this. Look to the people sitting to your left and your right and lean on them and enjoy the ride. There are going to be moments that are scary. You might need to hold somebody's hand and have fun with this. Roller coasters are meant to be at least a little bit fun sometimes. So I really like that roller coaster analogy and kind of taking it one step further than just sometimes it's scary and sometimes it's fun. There are reasons that we trust a roller coaster. So that's my kind of closing piece.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben. Colleen?
Wow, I love that. I'm no expert. I am not a parent of a trans child. I'm not trans myself, but one of the things that's really helped me when it comes to putting myself into other people's shoes has been just reminding myself and reminding other people that there's no experience in life where there's only 2 categories and you're always happy with the one that was assigned to you. There's almost no experience that I could think of where people are happy with just 2 options and you're stuck with one of them. And I think the more people can relate to the idea that most things in life are not binary and are not set in stone, and most things in life you're not happy doing exactly what everybody expected of you. I think that's helped me a lot, and I think that has helped some of the people I've talked to who've needed some attitude adjustments. But I think I hope that this resource is something that a lot of families can relate to and see themselves in. And again, I'm really impressed with the compassion in here to the families and to the parents. And I think there being enough room for youth, these people, these young people, to feel safe talking about what they're going through, and room for the parents to talk about why they're less equipped than they want to be to deal with this. I think there's enough compassion to go around for everybody involved.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. I so appreciate your time and talents and amazingness. I put the QR code up. You can use your phone. This resource is free. It is a PDF. You are welcome to share it with whomever you like. It's also on my website that you can grab and download for free as well. The hope was that, again, this was publicly available and easily accessible. And again, my, not so secret queer agenda is that everybody will seek out LGBTQ affirming therapy and organizations like Transparent, and go and see speakers like Ben and Ben's book that's coming out soon. And I'm just so grateful, Colleen, for your partnership in this. So thank you, everyone, for being here. And I will hang on for a second for folks who want to chat.
Thank you so much.
Happy Pride Month, everyone. Thanks for being here.
Yes.
Yes.
Thanks, Katie, for this fabulous resource. Excited about it.
Well, it was a labor of love, as they say.
Thank you so much for involving me. I have to hop off, but thank you to everybody. Thank you to the participants for asking questions. And thank you I'm just so happy I got to be part of this.
Thanks, Colleen.
Nice to meet you, Colleen.
Yes, you too.
Great work.
Thank you.
Yes, everybody should just hire Colleen. You should know that. Just
I got to clone myself. Thank
Good
you, though.
welcome.
Have a great night.
Bye.
Right. Well, thank you, Ben and Susan. I appreciate it. Let me know if I can ever show up for you. I will. I'll be
Absolutely.
there.
Thank you. Appreciate
your
You
book.
already have in our lovely Facebook Live.
Oh, gosh. An hour of me spitting out mythbusters about all the stuff in the AG's report. Ugh.
Oh, I love that.
It was great, though. I enjoyed it.
So Erin in the morning, her last thing about Arkansas, where she went through the
311 rulings. Yeah.
it was like, so it was the AG's report. It was like a complete rebuttal of that. And I'm like, could we just send that over? Yeah.
It's because they're all using the exact same false information to try to make their cases.
Yeah.
But it's not working.
Nope, not so far. All
Yeah.
right. Sorry, go ahead, Ben.
Oh, no, I was just going to agree.
All right. Well, I'll let you both go. Have a great night. Thank you again. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, everybody. Take care of yourselves.
Yes. Bye-bye.